Hi everyone, my name is Lars. I am a software engineer from Bremen, Germany, and over the last couple of months I've been hard at work creating a big Laravel application with the help of a neat little package called Inertia.js. You probably already heard about it somewhere, but maybe you didn't have the time to try it out yet. So that's why I'm here today. I'm going to give you a quick introduction into Inertia, show you how easy it is to set it up, and discuss Inertia's features with you. And hopefully, by the end of this talk, you'll have a better understanding of what Inertia exactly is and what it can do for you. So let's get started. Since we are at Laracon, I would assume that most of you are building server-driven or monolithic applications. Backend frameworks like Laravel or Rails give us a strong foundation with many great features. For example, we have the templating language Blade for our views, the ORM mapper Eloquent, notifications, and more when using Laravel. One problem with these monolithic applications, however, is interactivity. It might start with a simple confirmation model, but depending on the project requirements, you sometimes need graphs, sortable tables, in-place form validation, animations, transitions, and more. So what do? Probably you'll spin up Laravel Mix, add a front-end framework like Vue.js into your build process, boot up a Vue root instance in your main app layout Blade file, and then sprinkle your Blade views with some custom Vue components. And this can get you pretty far in most cases, but it can also get messy because with Blade and Vue, you are starting to mix and match multiple template languages. Especially in larger applications, this can become a problem. Your monolith quickly becomes the leaning tower of Pisa, and even then, some things are simply not possible because of the way a PHP framework like Laravel works. A single-page application with a front end entirely written in JavaScript would be a solution that checks all the boxes. But then you need to build a dedicated API for that inside your existing application. You need to take care of authenticating that SPA, and you probably need a second repository for your front end. It's a huge overhead. But thankfully, with Laravel we have some options available, and one of these options is Inertia.js. Inertia's promise is this. We can build a single-page application out of our monolithic app with a front end entirely written in JavaScript, but without losing any of the core benefits of Laravel and without creating too much overhead like constructing a separate API. So how does it work exactly? First of all, Inertia.js is not a framework. Think of it like some kind of glue that helps you to tightly couple your backend framework with your frontend framework. Inertia does this by offering multiple adapters. On the backend side, you can get adapters for Laravel and Rails, while on the frontend side, Inertia offers adapters for Vue, React, or Svelte. Let's take a look at a hypothetical Laravel application and install Inertia.js into it to see how it works. Let's take a look at this simple Laravel project that I've created. I have a welcome page that is displaying a message from the backend as well as rendering a custom Vue component. I also have a posts page, and we can use the navbar to navigate between both pages. So let's check out the code. As you can see, I have a file called app.blade. This file has a div container with an ID attribute that I am using as a mounting point for my Vue root instance, and a script tag that includes the versioned JavaScript that I compiled with Laravel Mix. In my app.js file, you can see that I imported Vue.js, registered my custom component, and bound my newly created Vue instance to the div container of my app.blade file. I registered two routes in my web.php routes file. And if you take a look at the welcome controller, you can see that I am simply returning the Blade views for both pages. The welcome page is also receiving a message. Both of my Blade views are extending my layout file app.blade. The welcome page is displaying the message that I included in the response of my controller, as well as rendering my custom component. Now let's see what we need to adjust in order to make this an Inertia application. As I said before, Inertia works like a glue between the backend framework and the front-end framework by providing various adapters. Let's start by installing the Laravel adapter. And the package is called Inertia.js / Inertia Laravel. Next, I need to insert the Inertia blade directive to my main layout file app.blade. So I am removing this div container and replace it with the Inertia blade directive. And finally, I need to modify my welcome controller. Instead of a blade view, we now need to return an Inertia response. We can do this by using the render method of the Inertia class. And here we are returning the the welcome page, and with a message, and the message will be hello Laracon. And now for the posts page this time for real, this is also Inertia render, and this is the posts page, and in here we are not passing in any data. And that's it for the backend. Now we just need to take care of our front end as well. So first we need to install the Inertia core package as well as the Inertia view adapter. So that's npm install, and for the core package that's Inertia.js / Inertia, and for the view adapter that's Inertia.js / Inertia view. And while that installs, we need to make some adjustments to our app.js file, and for the sake of speeding things up, I am gonna just copy and paste this in here real quick. And now just let me quickly explain what I'm doing here now. So first we are importing Vue as well as the app component and a Vue plugin from the Inertia view adapter. We then register the plugin with Vue, grab our mounting point as usual, and mount a newly created Vue root instance to it. I removed the global registration for my custom component, and you'll see in a minute why I did that. When instantiating the Vue root instance, I now need to use a render function that will accept the imported app component from the Inertia view adapter. I'm also passing in two props. The first prop will determine the initial page, while the second prop is a callback that will be used by Inertia to resolve the various page components. Usually all page components are in a subdirectory called pages, so make sure that it is present. And that's it. Now we just need to refactor the two blade views into page components. If you take a look at the pages directory, you can see that I already went ahead and prepared both components. If we look at the component for my welcome page, for example, you can see that I am already using the benefits of Vue's single file components by registering my custom component locally. So now let's build everything with npm run dev and give that a second to compile down. And now if we return to the browser and refresh the page, we can see that everything looks exactly the same. But if I check the Vue DevTools panel in Chrome down below, I can see that now there is an Inertia Vue component that has my welcome component as its children. And if we inspect the welcome component, we can see that the message property that we returned in our controller has been passed in as a prop. Our backend and frontend are now tightly coupled together. Alright, we successfully installed Inertia and refactored our blade views into Vue components. Now we can write our frontend entirely in JavaScript. However, there is still one problem. And let's go to the networking tab in Chrome so you can see what I mean. if we navigate between pages, it seems that this triggers full page visits. And if we inspect a response, we can see that we always get the full HTML from our master blade view. That's not what we want, because if we are reloading our main blade view on each request, this means that we are also causing a full reload of our client JavaScript each time we make a request. We are still missing the final piece of the puzzle, and these are inertia requests. We can use them to make page visits to our backend without triggering a full page reload. Inertia ships with a special view component that is called inertia link, and we can use it instead of our normal anchor elements inside our navbar. So I'm gonna quickly dive back into the code, and in my welcome component I am switching the anchor elements out with an inertia link component, and I just changed that for all my links in the welcome page and in the posts page as well. And then I'm compiling everything down again with npm run dev. And if we now switch back to the browser, give that a refresh, and navigate between pages and take a look at the networking tab, we can see that the responses we are receiving are now just a tiny amount of JSON instead of a full HTML view. We receive the targeted page component name as well as the data that we returned from the welcome controller for that view. But why is it working now? The inertia link component will render an anchor element but proceed to intercept all clicks on that element. It will then perform the request as an XML HTTP request instead of a normal HTTP request. The Inertia Laravel adapter will pick these requests up and return the JSON data, and then the view adapter from Inertia will swap out the page components dynamically, resulting in a complete single-page application experience. We now already got to know some of the basics of Inertia.js. Routing is done using the Inertia link view component, responses are handled by the render method of the Inertia class in Laravel, and instead of blade view files, we now create our pages by using single file view components. Now you might be wondering what else you can do with Inertia. But before we get into that, let's quickly discuss the things that Inertia does for you automatically. For example, redirects work out of the box. When redirecting to a different route in one of your controllers, you just need to ensure that your redirected route returns an inertia response. Then Inertia will take care of the rest and update the current page automatically. But what if you get a non-inertia response anyway? For example, let's imagine we're hitting an error. In this case, Laravel will return an error page from the ignition package. When performing requests from your JavaScript, this usually means that we would need to inspect this response in the networking tab of our browser's DevTools. But with Inertia.js, error handling is really straightforward. All non-inertia responses will be rendered in a modal on top of your current page. This way, you can inspect your ignition error page just like you would in a normal Laravel application. Additionally, when submitting a form request, the Inertia Laravel adapter will automatically take care of passing your validation errors back to your page. And then there's authentication. This is something you simply don't need to worry about since you are not connecting to a separate API after all. And you also don't have to worry about stuff like CORS because all of your files are under the same domain. And lastly, what about CSRF protection? You would assume that you need to pass the CSRF token with each request that you make with Inertia. But because Inertia is using Axios, which automatically checks for an XSRF token cookie behind the curtain, this is also working out of the box for you. Now let's take a look at layouts. Just like with Blade, you are able to compose your pages using multiple files. Here you can see my posts page component from earlier. you might remember that I had the code for my navbar in both page components for the posts page and the welcome page. Since this isn't a good approach, why don't we move the navbar into its own file? Let's see how this might work in Inertia. Here I simply move the navbar into a separate view component. The important part is that you need to define a default slot. And then in my posts page component, I simply import my nav layout view component and register it using the layout property with a render function. You can also nest multiple layout files like this. For example, here I went a step further and created a master layout on top of my nav layout. To make this more readable, Inertia also offers a shorthand, so you do not need to mess around with render function definitions. When navigating between different views, Inertia will only switch out the page component. This means that by using a layout component, our navbar would continuously stay rendered between page visits, which enables us to implement animations or transitions on the selected navbar item, which would not be possible in a normal application. Or what about some kind of audio widget that keeps playing while you navigate around your site? Thanks to layouts, it's very easy to do with Inertia. And if you do not want to specify the layout for each page component individually, you can set a default layout in the resolve component callback when creating your view root instance in your app.js file. We already know that we can make requests with Inertia by using the Inertia link component, but very often we need to perform these requests from our JavaScript itself. For this task, Inertia is offering a visit method, which you can call by accessing the Inertia object on your Vue instance. However, you probably will use one of these shortcut methods shown above. A typical use case for this is submitting forms. Submitting a form would usually trigger a full page visit using HTML, but as you already know, we do not like full page visits in Inertia.js. So we need to intercept the form submit, and this is where manual visits are the tool of your choice. Here you can see a very simple example. I registered the vOn directive for event handling using the @symbol shorthand and the .prevent modifier to intercept the submit event. Then I call the submit method on my Vue component. Inside of my submit method, I am calling the post method to make a visit to my Laravel backend using method post. I pass in my form data object as a parameter, and that's it. With Inertia, you do not have to handle the post submission behavior in your JavaScript. Everything is done in your Laravel application using redirects. You can simply redirect to a different page or redirect back to your current page with your form validation errors as a prop. And since props are reactive, your page will automatically update and display the form errors. The development experience is almost identical to a traditional Laravel application, if not even better. Just remember that for file uploads, you will need to use the form data object, so your submit method will look a little bit different than this. Another neat feature of manual visits are partial reloads. For example, imagine an index page that is displaying your posts. On the top, you might have a filter bar where you can filter the posts based on their category or their author. On your first page visit, Inertia will load all posts, categories, and authors. But as soon as you start filtering, you can tell Inertia to only reload the posts on subsequent visits to the page. You just need to be aware that this is only possible for the current page and that you would risk that the data for your filter options can become stale. In order to make this work perfectly, you should adjust your Inertia response call in your controller and use closures for data that should only be evaluated when needed. You can also use Inertia's lazy method to specify that certain data should never be loaded on a first visit to a page and only when it is requested. And finally, Inertia is offering various options when performing manual visits, which you can all check out in the official documentation. One cool option is scroll preservation. Usually your browser will jump back to the top of your page when making a request, and Inertia is adapting this default behavior. However, by defining the preserve scroll option on an Inertia link component or a manual visit, you can tell Inertia to preserve scroll position. This helps you to achieve a more app-like feel with your application. The Laravel adapter for Inertia also ships with a unique middleware that you should install, as it gives you easy access to a couple more features. To install it, simply run the artisan command to publish the middleware and then add it to the web middleware stack of your kernel.php file. Please note that it is very important that the Inertia middleware is the last item in your web middleware group array. The first feature of the Inertia middleware is data sharing. In the example from earlier, all data to the pages has been passed down as props by returning the data with the Inertia render method in the welcome controller. But sometimes we want to share data with multiple pages, such as the authenticated user or the app name. This can be done by using the share method of the Inertia middleware, as this middleware will run on each Inertia request. Please also note that all shared data will be merged with the page props, so make sure that you namespace your shared data to avoid naming conflicts. Then, in your template, you can access all shared data by accessing Inertia's page object. You can also share data lazily using closures, and you can alternatively use the share method of the Inertia class if you want to share data from somewhere else than the Inertia middleware. Another typical problem that you can face with a single page application is detecting changes with your site assets. To avoid this, Inertia can track your asset version and trigger a hard page visit on the next request if something changes. You can use the version method on the Inertia middleware or use the version method on the Inertia class. By default, Inertia will check the asset URL from the config app file or the mix manifest.json file from Laravel mix. You can also pass in any string as long as this string changes when your assets change. This is also a great way to implement cache busting. Inertia lately also added an event system. You can register Inertia events in your JavaScript by using the on method of the Inertia class. This method will always return a callback method, which you can access later to remove the event listener for the registered event. Inertia offers events for many use cases. The before event is useful for intercepting a visit, and the start event can help you implement a loading indicator. And please note that the success event will not fire when navigating through the browser's history. The invalid event will fire on all non-inertia responses, such as an ignition error page from Laravel. The error event will fire on unexpected XHR errors, such as networking errors. And the finish event can be used to hide a loading indicator, while the navigate event will work just like the success event, except that it will also fire when navigating in the browser's history. The events start, invalid, and error can also be cancelled by calling event.preventDefault. This is useful for overriding Inertia's default behavior, such as rendering non-inertia responses in a modal on top of your page. Most of these events are also available as callback functions when making a manual visit. Very often, you can use these instead of the global events that I just showed you. Because of the way single-page applications work, there is no loading indication present on a browser level. But thankfully, there are packages like nprogress that can help you implement your own loading indicator. Inertia offers its own package for this that is a slight wrapper around nprogress. install it using npm or yarn, import it in your main JavaScript file, and call the init method. You can adjust the behavior of the progress bar by specifying an optional delay in milliseconds or your own color. You can also hide the default spinner from nProgress or exclude the CSS just in case you wish to provide your own styling. The Inertia progress package is built for the 90% use case. If you need more control, you can always install nProgress and implement it manually using the Inertia event system. The official documentation for Inertia has a section on this topic that guides you into getting this up and running. When navigating through the browser's history, Inertia will cache props and use them to restore the page's components. However, sometimes you might want to restore the local state as well. For example, when navigating back to a page that includes a form, you might want to cache and restore the data the user has entered into that form. Inertia provides a view component attribute called remember. You can use it to tell Inertia which data attributes should be cached. You can provide a string, array, or even an object as a value in order to specify the data properties that should be cached. Please note that if your page contains multiple components, you need to provide a unique key for each component. And last but not least, there is one more handy feature, and that is to transform props. For example, let's say that you do not like the default way Laravel is returning errors. When creating your view root instance in your app.js file, you can include a third prop next to the prop's initial page and resolve component called transform props. Just like resolve component, this should be a callback function. All props for a page will be piped through this component where you can alter them as you like. Here we are converting a list of errors into a custom object. So, with all these exciting features, you might be wondering if there is even something at all that you would consider not so great. Well, there is, and that's server-side rendering, which is currently not supported. Second, since we are not using blade templates, there is no way for us to perform authorization checks in the front end. We need to pass the authorization results with our controller into page props, and this can bloat up your code a little bit. Also, since we cannot use the render method of Laravel's paginator class in our front end, you probably need to build a custom paginator. So if you want to use pagination, just remember that you probably need to put in some extra work on that end. So if server-side rendering is a requirement, you might want to think twice about using Inertia.js. And in terms of authorization and pagination, these just require some additional implementation on your end. Alright, and that's all I have for you today. If you want to try out Inertia.js, just go to Inertia.js.com. There you can check out the official documentation and a special demo application which you can explore and see what a typical Inertia application could look like. If you just want to play around with Inertia yourself, well, as you saw today, it is really easy to set it up. You can also get a ready-to-use project scaffolding with Laravel Jetstream, so that's also an option to give Inertia a quick spin. And if you want a deeper dive, I'll be doing a webinar at this year's Laracon where we'll explore Inertia in greater detail. So with that being said, thank you so much for listening, and I wish you all a great Laracon. You can and obviously should follow me on Twitter, and hopefully we will be able to see each other again in person at the next year's Laracon. Until then, stay safe everyone, and goodbye.